Welcome to Knitting and Reading. Today's episode is part 4 in the series of readings from a book called The Woman and the Car, written by Dorothy Levitt in London in 1909. I will read chapters 8, 9, and 10. These chapters include information about giving tips, distinguished women motorists, and the coming of the small car. Chapter 8, Tips, Necessary and Unnecessary, which includes the topics motoring now so general that an owner of a car is not any longer considered to be necessarily a millionairess. Tipping should be on a sensible basis. While the motor car has emphasized tipping, nowadays the modest shilling receives quite a welcome. When to tip and when not to tip, explained from personal experiences. If there is one thing more than another which the motor car has revived and intensified, it is the habit and practice of tipping. I need not give a lecture on tips. All of us agree, more or less, that the present-day tip is one of the banes of existence. But there are two sides to the question. One we as the givers of tips know a good deal about. Few know much about the other side, the side of the worker for and receiver of tips. Tips must therefore be divided into two classes, the necessary tip and the unnecessary. There are more of the latter than the former. Under the head of necessary tips, I would place the garage tip, whether the garage be a public one or a private one at the house of a friend. There are a few other necessary tips, such as when a friend lends you a car for a drive or a tour, or when your friend's chauffeur drives you to the railway station at an unusual hour or in very bad weather. Luckily, the motor car is coming into such general use today that those who may possess one are not necessarily put down as millionaires. The chauffeur, attendants, and servants generally are beginning to realize this and no longer expect a handful of money from every motoriste. The amount of tips which should be given, in the numerous cases which I am going to mention, should depend on your income and ability to afford. That millionaires are not usually generous tippers is a well-known fact. Generally, it is from the woman or man who is not very well off and who can ill afford it that the biggest tips come. To those who count their half-crowns as worth a full 30 pence and value them accordingly, I would say, do not be afraid to accept a friend's invitation to visit them with your motor car because you cannot afford to do much tipping. Be sensible about this matter, and I can assure you that your friend's chauffeur or groom will also be sensible and welcome the modest shilling or half-crown you give him. Tipping at a public garage, if you keep your car there, has already been touched on in a previous chapter. If you go on a tour or a little trip, driving yourself, and put your car in a public garage or the one attached to your hotel or roadside inn, your car will not be touched unless you so order. Then for cleaning it, furnishing petrol, charging battery, or anything else which may be wanted, there are regulation charges and these will be put down in your bill. The attendant at the garage may or may not be the man who did the work, but if he is, it would be quite the proper thing to give him a small tip, just as you might tip the waiter or the chambermaid had they done any satisfactory work for you. But this need not be more than either waiter or chambermaid receive, and if your car has not been cleaned, it is scarcely necessary to give the attendant even 6 pence unless he has done some service for you. Some hotels and wayside inns nowadays clean cars which stop with them overnight without extra charge. Yet the fee they charge for the garage really covers this. In such a case, a shilling to the man who did the work would not be amiss. Your car may come into his hands again, and he may do better work on it because of the little tip. If stopping just for lunch or tea at an hotel or inn, and for convenience's sake, you run your car into the garage or yard, a small tip is necessary. If you stop the night at a friend's house and your car is placed in your hostess's garage, you will find it spick and span in the morning with water in the tank and your petrol tank also replenished. Perhaps this petrol has been supplied from the spare you can carry, or it may have come from your friend's supply. You can quickly find out this. Naturally, you will test your tanks and you can question the attendant. Should the petrol tank not be filled up and should you have used all yours, you would naturally ask for enough to fill your wants. Pay for this, for in most garages nowadays a careful account is kept of petrol and other expenses. A 5-shilling tip for the man is quite enough. If your hostess should have a stable only and not a garage, and the man is only able to clean your car as he would a carriage, and you have to do the filling of the tanks and the starting of the engine and so on, a smaller tip is all that is necessary. In staying a weekend at a country house, if your car has not been used during your stay, the tip of 5 shillings is quite sufficient. But rules on such points depend on circumstances. If the weather has been bad and the car is in a very muddy state, the man will probably have had considerable extra work to bring out your car clean and shining. Remember what you would have had to pay at a public garage and act accordingly. If you merely pay a call or go to lunch or tea with a friend, and your hostess has a chauffeur who takes the car from you and brings it up to the front door at your departure, a little tip, perhaps 2 shillings, should suffice. But such a tip is quite an unnecessary one. The man has done nothing but what he has been paid to do by your hostess. He has done no special or extra work especially for you. It is always a good thing to keep this in mind whether or no a man whom you are about to tip has performed any direct service for you, extra in any way to what he has paid his wages for in connection with your car. If he has, a tip is not out of place, if you can afford to give one. Do not let the idea run away with you that simply because you own and drive a car you must be handing tips to everybody. More than half the tips given are absolutely unnecessary. There are dozens of cases where people foolishly tip. If your hostess's groom drove you in the dog cart to the station to catch a train, you might think a 2-shilling tip all sufficient. Yet when her chauffeur takes you to the same place in a motor car, you wonder whether he will think 5 shillings is enough. It is really very absurd. If we have to tip, why not treat the motor car as we would any vehicle and the chauffeur as we would any groom or coachman? There are some people who feel justified, if sent up to town in a friend's car, in giving the chauffeur as a tip the amount of the first-class railway fare for the distance. A tip decidedly should be given, but certainly not so large a one as this, in most cases, would figure out. If taken to town from a country house or vice versa, and one travels in the car with one's hostess, certainly no tip is necessary, nor should one be given if one goes for a drive with one's hostess. Should a friend lend you a car for a day or a drive, a small tip is properly given. But if a friend lends you a car for a tour of some days, the proper thing is to offer to pay the chauffeur's wages for the week. A tip on top of this should depend on the manner in which the man serves you. I have mentioned all these different points because at some time or another they may be actual experiences of the woman who owns and drives her own car. I do not claim to be an authority on tipping. I distribute a good many gold and silver pieces during a year, but I tip for services rendered and use common sense about the amounts. I get the best of service everywhere. If every woman who drives her own car followed my rule in this respect, the tipping nuisance would not be such a terrible thing after all. Chapter 9. Distinguished Women Motorists, which includes the topics: the Englishwoman at the wheel, her skill in mechanics and map reading, the Ladies' Automobile Club, some noble women motorists, successful competitors, lady racers at Brooklands, a motor christening. There is no country in the world, not even France, where the motoring movement received its first real start and its keenest pursuit, nor America, where the fair sex is supposed to receive it and to exercise its largest freedom. There is no country in the world in which woman may be seen at the helm of a motor car so frequently as in England. Whatever the cause, whether it be due to a greater sense of security from annoyance on public roads or simply to superiority of pluck, the fact remains that women in England excel their sisters in other countries as greatly in motoring as in horsemanship. Almost every woman who can afford it is, of course, a motoriste in the sense that she owns or has at her disposal a motor car. It is not, however, with the ladies whose experience of the pastime is limited to a seat beside or behind the driver that this chapter deals, but rather with those who are accustomed to the task of driving and caring for their cars, and who find a healthful recreation in doing it. 20 or 30 years ago, two of the essentials to a motorist, some acquaintance with mechanics and the ability to understand local topography, were supposed to be beyond the capacity of a woman's brain. The supposition was simply due to the fact that woman's brain had never the occasion to approach these subjects. 50 years ago, a satirical writer, a man of course, averred that although instruction in the use of globes was part of the curriculum of every girl's school, no woman could understand or would try to understand a road map. If the remark was true when it was written, it is certainly not true today. The schoolroom globes have long been buried in the dust of disuse, but the pastimes of cycling and motoring have made the understanding of maps a necessity to every active gentlewoman. Indeed, the average woman is probably quicker than the average man in gathering from a map the information which it has to offer. So with mechanics. If a woman wants to learn how to drive and to understand a motor car, she can and will learn as quickly as a man. Hundreds of women have done so and are doing so, and there is many a one whose keen eyes can detect and whose deft fingers can remedy a loose nut or a faulty electrical connection in half the time the professional chauffeur would spend upon the work. Incontestable evidence of the practical interest which English women are taking in motoring is afforded by the existence and prosperity of the Ladies' Automobile Club. This institution was established in 1903. The annual subscription is 5 guineas, and there is an entrance fee of the same amount. There are nearly 400 members, most of whom are fully competent to drive their own cars. The club has successfully organized a number of tours in England and on the continent, as well as driving competitions at Ranelagh. The president of the Ladies' Automobile Club, the Duchess of Sutherland, is the grande dame of automobilism in England. The Duchess is an accomplished motoriste, and although in cold weather she prefers to be driven by somebody else, in summer she may often be seen at the wheel. Her latest car is a Mercedes. Another peeress who drives, and drives well, is the Countess of Kinnoul. The Countess shares her husband's fondness for sport, a great variety of which is provided in the neighborhood of their beautiful Scottish home at Duplin Castle, and she finds the motor car an indispensable adjunct to the full enjoyment of country life. Lady Wimborne, whose energy and industry are as inexhaustible as those of her brother, the late Lord Randolph Churchill, finds the motor car an invaluable aid to her useful activities as well as a means of recreation. She has 3 or 4 cars and is an able and confident driver. Lady Viola Talbot, daughter of the Premier Earl of England, is like her father in the love of sport. Like him, she is almost as fond of motors as of horses. She is mistress of the car and its appurtenances, and has driven some thousands of miles at home and abroad. Among other titled ladies who count their miles by the thousand may be named Lady Beatrice Rawson, a devotee of the small car, Lady Muriel Gore Brown, the Honorable Mrs. Maurice Gifford of Boothby Hall, Grantham, Lady Plowden, and the Baroness Campbell de Lorentz. The Baroness has the distinction of being the first lady in Britain to drive and manage her own car. Cars in those days were patterned like high dog carts and were mostly steamers. The Baroness possesses several photographs of herself and husband with the groom in the tiger seat of the old-fashioned car. Today, these pictures have a very queer look. A complete list of the ladies who have taken part in motor car road trials and club competitions would be wearisome to the reader, but a few names may be mentioned. Miss Muriel Hind, one of the few women who favor the motor bicycle, has won many medals in long-distance trials. Mrs. Herbert Lloyd, who is not only an expert driver but the inventor of some very ingenious appliances for motor cars, has done well in open competition with professional male drivers. Miss Daisy Hampson has won prizes with her 120 horsepower Fiat. Mrs. E. Manville has taken part in the Herkimer competition. No list of distinguished women's motoristes would be complete without the names of those who took part in the first race for ladies upon the Brooklands course. The race, which was called the Ladies' Bracelet Handicap, took place in July 1908. There were 5 starters: Mrs. Locke King, wife of the founder and owner of Brooklands Racecourse, Miss Muriel Thompson, Miss Christabel Ellis, Miss N. Ridge Jones, and Mrs. J. Rowland Hewitt. Mrs. Locke King, who started from scratch, finished a length in front of Miss Muriel Thompson, her speed over the course being at the rate of 50 miles an hour. There are few lady motoristes who take a keener practical interest in their cars than Miss Isabel Savory. Miss Savory, who has driven many cars, is loud in her praises of her 10-horsepower Cadillac. This car she has always driven and attended to herself, never having employed a chauffeur. She has done all the oiling and adjustments and has put on many a new inner tube by the roadside. She has driven long distances without any companion and has dealt single-handed and successfully with every emergency that has arisen. Mrs. George Thrupp of Cadogan Square has been driving ever since 1896. Her favorite cars are the Renault and Morse, in which she has toured in Great Britain and on the continent. She has won prizes in driving competitions. She was, in fact, one of the pioneers of motoring for women, and her youngest boy, Roger, was the first baby to have a motor christening. Other names of motoring women that occur to one are those of Mrs. Edward Kennard, the novelist, who is equally at home at the wheel of a 40-horsepower Napier car and in the saddle of a motor bicycle, Miss Hunter Bailey of Cirencester, Mrs. Mark Mayhew, Ms. Schiff, Mrs. Claude Payne, Mrs. Nicol, Mrs. Waglin, Mrs. Charles Jarrett, and Mrs. Edge. No doubt there are other names which at the moment have slipped the memory, but which have as good a claim as those to inclusion in the catalogue of distinguished women motoristes. The list is long enough, however, to show the ardor and success with which women have applied themselves to the mechanical details of automobilism. Chapter 10. The Coming of the Small Car, which includes the topics A Good Car at a Low Price, Lessons of the Small Car Derby, Some Notable Small Cars and Their Cost, Comparatively Low Running Expenses, The Car of the People. One of the latest and most notable developments of the motor industry is the prominence of the small car. It is obvious that the number of individuals who can afford to pay from £100 to £230 for a motor car for purposes either of pleasure or business is enormous in proportion to the number of those who can afford to pay more. Motor manufacturers have never been blind to that fact. It is only in recent years, however, that they have seen their way to meet the demand with satisfaction to their customers and profit to themselves. The small car has come, and its merits are so considerable, the pockets to which it appeals so many, that its popularity is assured. It is not a very rash prophecy to declare that in a few years' time it will be the vehicle most commonly met with on the high road, and its manufacture the mainstay of the motor trade. In France, where the possibilities, commercial and practical, of the small car were first foreseen, the great motor race of the year, the Grand Prix of the Automobile Club de France, is now preceded by a Grand Prix de Voiturettes, and the result of the 1908 contest is a striking illustration of the speed and reliability of which some of these little vehicles are capable. Of the 47 Voiturettes which went to the post, 20 completed the course of 286 miles in a little more than 7.5 hours. The winner, a car driven by a single-cylinder de Dion engine and weighing little more than 1,200 weight, covered the distance in 5 hours and 3/4, an average speed of nearly 50 miles an hour, while the second car, a single-cylinder Césaire, which was only 6 minutes behind at the finish, covered one of the laps at an average speed of more than 53 miles an hour. Speeds such as these are happily not lawful on English roads. I point to them only to illustrate the power that the motor manufacturer has succeeded in obtaining from a single cylinder of less than 4 inches bore, and the excellence of design and material which has enabled him to produce a little vehicle weighing a good deal less than a ton, yet capable of withstanding the shocks of rattling over 286 miles of country road at racing speed. The race for the Grand Prix des Voiturettes and other recent trials have amply demonstrated the speed and reliability of the small car. They have shown that for sums ranging from 150 to 230 pounds, the manufacturer can make a car which, for all practical purposes of everyday use upon the road, is the equal in speed and trustworthiness of a car costing from 3 to 5 times as much. The 8-horsepower de Dion, which cost 225 pounds 15 shillings, went through the International Touring Car Trial of 1908 with flying colors. It covered 1,800 miles of arduous road work in capital style, and by shedding one of its passengers, it even managed to climb the terrible 2-mile slope of the Kirkstone Pass. The 9-horsepower Césaire, the engine already referred to as having accomplished the fastest lap in the Grand Prix, costs 190 guineas. There are many other cars, British and foreign, not less reliable and equally moderate in price. The Phoenix, for example, a twin-cylinder car costing 140 pounds. The Jackson de Dion costing 220 pounds. The Pick, a 4-cylinder 14 to 16 horsepower car costing only 165 pounds. The Rover, costing from 100 to 200 guineas according to engine power and finish. And the Vauxhall. When it is remembered that the cars can often be bought second-hand but in first-class condition for about 2/3 of their original cost, it will be recognized that motoring need not be the exclusive privilege of the very rich. It is not, however, in the comparison of first cost so much as in that of the cost of maintenance that the small car appeals to the man of moderate means. Generally speaking, it may be said that as compared with a full-powered car, the small car uses little more than 1/3 the quantity of petrol per mile traveled, and that its tires cost only half as much and last twice as long. A gallon of petrol, which will propel a big car 12 or 15 miles, will propel a little Rover or Phoenix from 30 to 40 miles. Here is a statement of the actual cost of running a 6-horsepower Rover for 11 months over nearly 6,000 miles of country roads. Tire repairs, £2, 2 shillings, 9 pence. Petrol, £12. Oil, £18. Sundry repairs, £4, 12 shillings, 5 pence. Total, £19, 13 shillings, 2 pence. The car belonged to a doctor who had to make frequent stoppages on the way so that the consumption of petrol was higher than it would have been with continuous traveling. Nevertheless, the cost of running the car works out at about 4/5 of a penny per mile, less than a third-class railway fare for one person. This is, no doubt, an exceptionally low figure. Another user of an exactly similar car has found the cost of running 3,400 miles to be as follows. Tire repairs, £2 13 shillings. Petrol, £6 19 shillings. Oil and grease, £2 6 shillings. Sundry repairs, £1 10 shillings. Charging accumulators, 18 shillings. Brushes and waste, 10 shillings. Total, £14 16 shillings. Almost exactly a penny a mile. To these figures must, of course, be added the cost of licenses, insurance, garaging, and an allowance for the depreciation of the car, that is to say, the difference between its first cost and the price at which it could be resold. In every respect but one, the advantages of the small car over its big brother are enormous. Its one drawback is that its accommodation is necessarily smaller. The typical small car is a two-seater, but that is the essence of its economy. Extra seats and extra passengers mean extra weight, and extra weight requires larger engines and more petrol, and entails more wear and tear on tires, machinery, and chassis. It is the weight that runs up the maintenance bill, and the prospective purchaser should bear this in mind if he hankers after an extra seat. I may point out, nevertheless, that some of the small cars in the market can be fitted with a detachable rear seat for £6 or £7, and that others have sufficient space for the accommodation of an extra passenger upon the floor. A friend who owns a two-seater Césaire tells me that it often carries 4 passengers to the railway station. It is a two-seater, however, that the small car bases its claim to popular favor. In the majority of journeys by any sort of private vehicle, 2 is the number for which accommodation is most frequently required. Many owners of large cars have discovered that the occasions on which a two-seater would not serve their motoring purposes are comparatively few. Obviously, it is gross extravagance to employ the voracious eater of petrol and rubber upon a service which can be accomplished at a quarter of the cost by a smaller car, at the same speed, with less strain upon the driver and with equal comfort to the passenger. For these reasons, the time is at hand when every motor car owner, however many big cars he may possess, must add to his fleet at least one two-seater for runabout purposes. The large car will be a luxury, the small car will be a necessity, and not only for those who are ordinarily described as wealthy. The time is coming when every man who can afford to go out of town at week's end will find it worth his while to be a motorist, when every suburban house with a rental of over £60 will have its motor shed, and when the small car will be as prevalent upon the country road as the bicycle is today. Today's reading is finished. This also concludes the reading of this book that has been called The Woman and the Car by Dorothy Levitt, published in 1909. The only chapter that remains is a glossary of terms. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, take care.